lights are down low, the snow it is falling. The streets are all empty, we're headed back home. And everyone's telling their old Christmas stories, but I can't help thinking about Cora Jones.
Hello, it's been a while since we've done a video or a podcast, but we've been very busy, believe it or not, working on things in the Neal Casal Music Foundation world and on Neal Casal Music. We're here to talk about some of the music and some of the projects that we're doing next year. The thing I'm very excited about is an archival release that we're doing of some of Neal's 1990s unheard songs, demos, and we've spent a lot of time working on these, transferring them from the original master tapes to digital. Some of them are just going to be untouched. Some of them have a few little additions to them that I think Neal would have approved of, just making them a little bit better, I think. And one of the songs that's going to be on that album is a song that some of you may have heard. It's a song called Cora Jones, or the Ballad of Cora Jones. It's a song Neal did in 1998. Most of the other songs that are going to be included on this record that we're going to put out are earlier than that. But this one came out in 1998, and it was originally released on a record called A Christmas to Remember, which came out right around that same, maybe it was 99 or 98. And Neal wrote this song about a very tragic and true story that happened in Wisconsin, which is a place that he spent a lot of time in the early 1990s. Some of you may know that when Neal was 19, he got a job as a guitar player in a southern rock band called Blackfoot. Neal and I were huge fans of this band, and they were a popular band, but never all that well known. But the main guy in the band, Ricky Medlock, was an original member of Lynyrd Skynyrd, then formed his own band called Blackfoot, and subsequently went back to Lynyrd Skynyrd and has been in Lynyrd Skynyrd the last 25 years or so. But Blackfoot was a great band, and Neal and I loved them. They were hugely important in our musical lives. And I had become friends. I was working at a record store, and I had become friends with their management, and the band was kind of falling apart, but they were looking for some young members to replace some of the original members. And I suggested Neal as a 19-year-old guitar player, and he got the gig and toured with them for a few years. And that's a whole other story. But when he was in that band, he met this lovely couple, lovely family, actually, Libby McDonald and her husband, Eric McDonald, and they had a son and a daughter. Dane was the son, and Rhiannon was the daughter. And Neal spent a lot of time with them on outdoor adventures in Wisconsin, water skiing, mountain climbing, all kinds of stuff. And they really became almost like an extended family to him. And in 1994, and they lived in this beautiful rural place in Wisconsin. And I think Neal just thought of it as this magical, safe place. And a tragic thing happened there. A 12-year-old girl named Cora Jones was kidnapped and murdered. And it, of course, affected everyone in the community, most of all her family. And Neal was really devastated by this. And it caused him a few months later to write the song. And in this video, I'll read a letter that he wrote to her family after he wrote this song. But what I'm going to do is bring on Libby McDonald and her daughter Rhiannon, and they're going to tell some memories of Neal and about this incident that happened with this innocent young girl named Cora Jones and the beautiful song that Neal wrote to go with it. So let's bring on Libby and Rhiannon. All right, well, This is my old friend Libby McDonald and her daughter Rhiannon. Thanks for coming on. I know we've talked about this a long time. This song that Neal wrote called Cora Jones, or the Ballad of Cora Jones. And but Libby, I wanted to. I in my intro I talked about Blackfoot a little bit and Neal's time in Blackfoot as a hard rocker,
Yeah.
and I know that's how you and your dearly departed and legendary husband, Eric McDonald, who I was a huge fan of. You guys met Neal when he was in Blackfoot because I guess you knew Ricky Medlock. So tell us how you met Neal and how you became such great friends, because you and Eric were really influential on him, on his life, and you, Rhiannon, too, and your brother.
He was very influential on ours as well. We actually, Eric and I met Blackfoot when they were still with Greg and Jack and Charlie, the original lineup, back in 1983. Rhiannon was just a baby, and we went to this concert in Green Bay, and that was back when you had access to backstage. And Eric was just like, act as if we're just going to walk back there as if we own the place, and we did, and met them. And Jackson and Greg were like immediately latched on to us, and we became really close friends with them. Ricky as well. Ricky was a little bit more, kind of, playing the room, but we got to meet him, and all three of us became really good friends. Greg and Jack used to come up to the lake house, which you'll hear more about, which was, the place that Neal loved so very, very much. Used to come up every summer and go boating and, ATVing and hiking and just hang out and drink Captain Morgan and Coke. And Jackson and Greg, they were amazing. And Ricky too. Ricky would come to the cottage. He was there only a couple of times. We would visit him in Florida when we would be down there where his home was. So we had stayed in touch with them for most of the 80s, and then I'm pretty sure it was 1990. My time frame might be a little bit off. I know that it was when Medicine Man, if you remember the CD.
1990.
That was 90. Okay, then that's the year that we met Neal with Tim, who was the bass player that had replaced Greg. Charlie and Greg. Yeah, Greg the bass player, Charlie the guitar player. And so we kept going to shows. I mean, we went to shows all over the area. We were super fans. Rhiannon, you'll remember this. The license plate that Eric used to have on his car was Blackfoot, and
with two Sharpied feet as the O's of Blackfoot, like little footprints.
Yeah, we still have that hanging somewhere. But he left a space between the F and the T, abbreviating Blackfoot, and had two little, as Rhiannon said, Sharpied feet drawn, and actually got in trouble for that from the cops at one point, because you can't do that to license plates. So, but it was just a statement of how we were into Southern rock from the time we met. Eric was only 18 when we met. And so we, big fans of Skinner and all those boys. So it was 1990 when Greg and Jack were no longer with the group that we went to a show, and here's these two other guys, Tim with his, the very long hair. If you remember pictures of Tim, I don't remember his name, the bass player.
Tim Stunson.
Stunson, yes, exactly. These two new punks with the band, and man, they were good. I mean, there was you couldn't tell the difference if you didn't know it wasn't the original players. You would never have known it was, two new young guns, three with the drummer. So anyway, so we would always go out, and we always hung out with Ricky. So that's when we met Neal, and same kind of thing. Eric was a a very charismatic guy, and as you know, he just would, he had no problem just going up and talking to anybody and struck up a conversation, and that was history. I mean, it was this was, I believe, one of the first shows that we met him at was in northern Wisconsin, Rhiannon. I don't know if you remember, like Townsend or just some little town, when they were on tour in the summertime.
Yeah.
And that's when we met, and just hit it off, and told him about this gorgeous summer place that we had on Silver Lake. And
in Wisconsin, correct?
In Wisconsin, yes. This is in northern Wisconsin. We lived in Milwaukee at the time, but we had the summer home where, we basically raised Rhiannon and Dane up there on weekends and long weeks that we would be up there, because this was the most spectacular place on earth. And I'll give you, a couple of pictures with Neal there to share. But so that was the start of this, relationship. And I actually have photos of the first time that Neal actually came to that place, and we had the fire pit outside, and he's playing Eric's guitar. He didn't bring his with him. We just stole him from the venue, and because he wanted to go. He was all about adventure and hanging out with people. That was his thing.
Yeah.
And came in and just we all sang songs around the fire while he played guitar. It was incredible, and that was the start of pretty much every year we would come up and spend time at Silver Lake and at the house. He would come to our house in Milwaukee, and sometimes he just wouldn't leave, and that was awesome. He living in our basement, writing songs, and we had a baby grand piano down there he'd play. And so we had all this time, and the kids spent tons of time with him. It was Uncle Ricky. You used to refer to Medlock as Uncle Ricky.
Right.
And Neal was even more so.
Even closer than an uncle in a lot of ways. Just
He was
almost big brother-like, but, a large enough age gap to feel like you were really excited to be around his energy and his experience. And I remember times of him coming back from playing shows and being in New York and bringing me these vintage clothing from thrift shops, and just feeling so excited, like, oh, you're back, or him seeing me off to homecoming. Just all these different memories. But even from really young, he loved it up north. He loved it up north. He loved the ATVing, and he loved being on the water, and he loved the forest, just being in the woods, and the simplicity of it, and the privacy, but just the sense of being somewhere very big. It was great.
Yeah. But I remember Neal. I never got to come up there for whatever reason. I know that I always had the invite, but in those days I was working and I was on the road and I was doing things, and it just never worked out. And Neal always had the greatest time there, and it was his favorite place to go. And he would always tell me about it. And of course, like Eric then started doing a bunch of stuff with Neal, made some early videos for Neal's early solo songs, which were classic. And I hope
that you have those. And I won't say the name of the first one if you don't want me to.
Oh, it's fine. I had, there's Indian Summer.
That was the first one that we recorded. Both, we went to Nashville to record some of that. We did a road trip to Nashville, and then we did some of it up in the fall with the gorgeous fall colors. Up in northern Wisconsin and at the lake, and actually did a lot of the the rough editing there. I got pictures of those guys sitting around the table, Rhiannon, down in the breakfast room, with all the equipment, and they'd both be sitting there, like two, professors working on this project. So Indian Summer was the very first one, and
Open Ground was the other one.
Open Ground we actually did in, I think that was 95 maybe. And we did that one here in around the Milwaukee area at a big dance hall. And there's a cool story that goes
there. I remember this story.
Yeah. It was the middle of winter. Christy came with him to, beautify him and do his makeup. And it was this big old dance hall that just spectacular, all wood, and had this really cool old vibe to it. And it was so cold, Gary, that the our crew, we had a full film crew that would come in and do these things, and it was so cold that their smoke machines wouldn't work, to give it some ambiance. So our friends Don and Gerald, who were very, very near and close to Neal as well, ran to their house and got 2 toasters and went to the store and bought, bags full of bread and came back and burnt toast to get smoke in the air. For
the moodiness and the ambiance.
I think it's like, nobody knows that, kind of that cool, softened ambiance from that video is from, burning toast.
Amazing.
It smelled like burning toast for days afterwards.
Amazing. We could watch a little clip of that right here.
Did the time go all these years? After the pictures have been burned and the names have been cleared from all that she remembers, adds up in time to not a thing, no, not a thing. She's waiting for somebody else to save her day, or at least to see his face before he goes away.
The cool thing, and one of the things that we're doing, and Indian Summer will be involved, is that we're working on a release next year of Neal's 90s recordings that no one's ever heard. So we've dug them all out. We've transferred the analog tapes to digital. We've cleaned them all up. And so the world will get to hear Indian Summer and all these amazing other songs that he wrote.
That was that was all of those songs, including the demos that he would bring to us, were like the soundtrack of the 90s for us, right, Rhiannon? I mean, that's all we would listen to pretty much.
Yeah.
We were kind of...
It's extremely nostalgic for my entire childhood. Every time I hear those songs, anytime we play them, I'm just like immediately transported back to an entire era, it feels like, in my growing up with you all.
Yeah, it was. I found one demo, and I'm not sure if it's just a dummy with a case. We did this EPK that we sent out to a bunch of record execs after the deal with Zoo went away.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't have a boombox handy to listen to see, because it's got like Silver Dollar on there. It's got a couple of other, of his big demos that we all said, why were these never released?
Well, they're going to be released, and listen to that link that I sent you, and you'll hear them all. But and one of the songs that's on this archive release that we're putting out is Cora Jones, and so let's talk about how that it's a tragic story. And for anybody who hasn't heard the song was released I think in 1998. It was on a Christmas album called A Christmas to Remember.
You know what? It was actually on 2, Gary. I actually have both CDs. When Neal passed, I hopped online and bought up a lot of things, like obscure things like that. And I have A Christmas to Remember on CD. I'm sorry, I'm looking for all of my representative samples. And it was also released in 2002, I want to say, over in Europe on, Mojo magazine.
Yeah, that's right. We put it. We did put it on a sampler there, but the version that's coming out next year and that we're going to listen to tonight is a little bit different. It's the same recording, but we've just made it a little bit better in the last couple of months. But the story is a tragic and terrible story.
It was in central Wisconsin. It was about 100 miles from Leona.
Yeah.
And this was back in, and no, I don't have my timeline notes with me, but I believe it was 1994, the summer of 1994.
Yeah.
And Neal was there, and we would get a newspaper. Back in those days, we'd get a newspaper, and he saw that headline about this little girl, Cora, who went missing. And he followed it and was so touched with it, and kept those newspaper clippings. And there's some interesting things. This became a huge story, nationally, with her. Her killer, her rapist and killer, was a serial rapist and killer. He had a rap sheet that went on forever. Became notorious among those that follow that kind of morbid stuff. And yeah, he so Neal was following this story because for some reason it really touched him. I think a lot of it was because he considered northern Wisconsin and up at the lake, that was his almost like a safe haven for him, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. And to have something that tragic and that awful happen in that area that he trusted and loved so much was it got to him. So he kept these newspaper clippings, and interestingly enough, there's some interesting timing things with when as he was following this, when he went back to New Jersey, that the day that he actually recorded that song was the day that they found the killer. He actually mentions that in his letter, because it was after the fact, after he'd started writing it. And then it goes on, he wrote this incredible letter, and I'll get back to that whole thing in a minute. But then the other interesting thing was that the day that he recorded the song was the day that they sentenced this evil man to 3 or 4 life sentences and 400 years. And I don't know that he ever knew that. I'm sure that we probably mentioned it to him, or if he continued to follow it from afar, he would have known that. But it was just really interesting, all of these timing factors, with his personal vested interest in it.
Yeah.
So he wrote this incredible letter to the Joneses. And Neal was, if this was 94, how old would Neal have been?
26.
He was, just young, incredible musicians, but still very, very young, and wrote this letter that he even states throughout it how he doesn't even know if it's the right thing to do, but he wanted to reach out to the parents because this touched him, and how the fact that Cora was not going to be around that Christmas, I think he was feeling that and being very empathetic to the parents. So he wrote this letter, and the song, of course, he recorded. And he wanted us to, if we could somehow, rather than just mailing it to them, wanted to see if we would personally deliver it to Cora's parents. So, Rhiannon, you'll very vividly remember this, because this is one of probably the most impactful Christmases of my life, and I know it was of yours and Dane's, because Rhiannon was the same age as Cora when she was murdered, and she had a little brother that was the same age as Dane.
I get the sense that that's part of why Neal was impacted so much.
I've been thinking about that was because he was so close to you guys, and there was this horrible thing that happened so close by, and it could have been anybody, could have been you,
Yeah.
So we got the letter, FedExed a letter with the cassette of the song that he'd recorded. And Christmas Eve, 1994, we loaded up the kids and our 2 dogs, and we set out up to northern Wisconsin from the Milwaukee area where we were living at the time, and to try and find, Cora's house. Now, this was back obviously before Google Maps. So we didn't even, have anything other than a rural route number to go and try and find,
snowy roads and dark and Christmassy snowy night.
Yeah. And so it was, I remember this clearly, of coming across as we're just driving, kind of not aimlessly, but, kind of in a grid pattern to try and find this house up in northern Wisconsin, or in central Wisconsin, of seeing this house with Cora's picture, which was the same picture that they had used in the newspaper and on television when she went missing, just surrounded by lights and, spotlights. It was like you couldn't miss it. And it's like, wow, there it is. I think we all kind of had goosebumps at that point, right, Rhiannon? Where it was very impactful.
Yeah.
And we were nervous. We don't know who these people are, and their daughter had just, been murdered, and this was Christmas Eve, and we pull into the driveway, and went and knocked on the door, and they let us in. Her mom, Vicky,
they welcomed us in. They really did.
This is small town. This is where, everybody, as awful as this was, is very trusting, and, everybody talks to everybody, and they were so used to people helping them when they were helping with the search and with everything else, in the aftermath, that, they welcomed us in, and we sat and we talked with them, and they told us about all of the help they were getting from people and the compassion that people were showing. These were very, as I've mentioned in my writings, very salt of the earth, very down to earth, kind people. And we told them the story about Neal, and how this young musician, was compelled to write a song about Cora, a Christmas song. And first read them the letter. Eric read them the letter.
Neal wrote this letter on December 20th, 1994, about 28 years ago. Dear Mr. and Mrs. Jones, my name is Neal Casal, a 26-year-old musician from Oak Ridge, New Jersey. I'm writing you this letter to say how very sorry I am about the loss of your daughter, Cora, although I'd never met her or anyone in your family. I'm also writing to tell you about a song that I've written in her memory called The Ballad of Cora Jones. I first heard of Cora's disappearance back in September while vacationing with friends in Leona, Wisconsin. Although she had not yet been found, it was impossible for me to believe that something like this could happen in such a beautiful and picturesque part of our country. Throughout the days that it took to find her, I read the newspaper articles, listened to the radio reports, and held out hope that she was all right. Sadly, on my way out of Leona, I stopped in a convenience store, and the headline saying that Cora had been found was staring me in the face. For reasons that would become clear to me only later, I saved the article and took it home to New Jersey with me. What was very clear to me, however, was that Cora's death saddened and shocked me more than any of these words will ever say, but I must try to tell you again how truly sorry I am. I had never thought of writing a song about Cora until a few weeks ago when a friend who owns a studio asked me to record a Christmas song for a tape that she was going to release locally. Because I had never written a Christmas song before, I thought of several old classics that I could re-record. I also thought of the other artists involved in this project who were mostly recording very happy and upbeat Christmas songs. Suddenly, something in my memory clicked, and I thought of Cora and how her family must be feeling this year without her. I ran to my guitar, grabbed the article I had saved, and within a few hours I had the finished song. The next night, the song was recorded in one take with the help of a few friends. The tape was never released, but the song remained. I wasn't sure if it would be appropriate to send it to you, but those same friends insisted that I did. So here it is, simply an offering of peace, sympathy, and remembrance. Ironically, I found out a few days ago that the day I wrote the song was the day they found the man who took Cora's life. Please understand any lyrical liberties I've taken in telling this story. Of course, I don't know if you, Mr. Jones, are a logger, or if your family lives on a farm, or any other details about your lives. but sometimes a songwriter must use his imagination if his knowledge is limited to a short newspaper article. Please know that I have not tried to distort any facts or offend anyone involved here. I realize that this is a very difficult subject and that writing a song about it may not be the right thing to do, but I just wanted to bring to light the sadness in losing such a young life, so full of promise and wonder, and to show the sorrow and outrage that this loss can cause. I suppose I'm only guessing here since I've never lost a close family member, but I have tried my best to keep this song within the bounds of compassion and good taste, and the inspiration to write it was truly genuine and heartfelt. So that's the story of Cora's song. This has been the most difficult letter I've ever written. It's so hard to know what and what not to say. I guess I've told you all that I can. The song can take it from here. Thank you so much for taking the time to read this. Have a wonderful holiday, and may the memory of your daughter live forever. Sincerely, Neal Casal.
And they were very, very moved by that. And then we had a boom box, of course, and we played the song for them. I don't think there was a dry eye in the place, even after we'd heard it, a couple of times. So they were so appreciative, and I think they were almost at that point, when you've just lost anybody, that close, that soon. I think that they were still kind of numb to the whole thing, but they got that song and they loved it, and they were so appreciative. And couldn't believe that, somebody took the time to not only write that letter, a very long, compassionate letter, telling why he wrote the song, but then recording that song. And as you said, Gary, and you know more about the timing of, it was supposed to be released locally, and then it wasn't, but then it was put on, the 2 different CDs.
Yeah.
And there's actually a link on YouTube that I found a few years ago. I don't know that anybody can find it. I'm not even sure how I found it. It's the original old version of it. So yeah, it's that was so crazy impactful. I mean, I just even get goosebumps thinking about meeting these people and how what Christmases are like, and even to this day, they celebrate her. She would have been 40 this year, by the way, Gary. I don't know if you did the math on that.
Yeah, the version that you would have played them would have been his acoustic version of the song.
Yes,
but which I do still have, and I'll send it to you guys because you should have it. But what we'll listen to now is the version that he recorded in 1998. And he recorded it, I think it was the summertime. It was hot out, as I remember that. And we were recording the song, and we recorded it at Sound City Studios, which is a famous studio in Los Angeles.
Yeah.
And it was Jim Scott producing it, Neal playing guitar, of course, John Ginty on keyboards. Greg Leisz played guitar, pedal steel, and he also played bass, because normally we would have Bob Glaub, but Bob was on a tour, so he couldn't come. And Don Heffington, the late, great Don Heffington, played drums. And when you hear the song, you'll hear at the end of the song, they were playing it, and they kind of segued into Silent Night.
I was going to ask about that, yeah.
So after Neal stopped singing, the song was essentially over, but they kept playing, and they kind of worked their way into Silent Night. And I think it just happened. I don't think it was like, let's go into Silent Night. They just kept playing, and then Greg started doing a couple little melodies that referenced Silent Night, but you wouldn't have heard it so much as Silent Night. But when we listened back to it, we were all like, wow, that's Silent Night kind of. And Jim Scott said, I got an idea. My friend is an opera singer.
Wow.
Let me call her and see if she can somehow get here to the studio and sing over the ending of it. Her name was Juliana Gondek. And Jim called her, and this was pre-cell phones, or some people had cell phones, but Jim called her, got her at home. She got in her car. Of course, it was Los Angeles rush hour traffic. It took her a couple hours to get there. She went in the studio, put her headphones on, got in front of a microphone, and did this incredible vocal part that you're about to hear at the end of the song. And when that happened, we were all just like, oh my God, this is like a miracle. So out of something, horribly tragic, at least this small, beautiful thing did come.
Yeah.
Lights are down low, the snow it is falling. The streets are all empty, we're headed back home. And everyone's telling their old Christmas stories, but I can't help thinking about Cora Jones. She was as sweet as an angel. She lived for 12 years on a Wisconsin farm. She liked to ride horses and dream by the river, but she loved Christmas the best of them all. Spent time chopping logs in the north woods. Her mother worked hard taking care of the kids. They all stuck together come hell or high water. These days that's all that a family can do. September, Cora went out bike riding. She waved to her mama, she waved to her brother. She stopped at the curb just to tell them she loved him, but nobody knew she would never come back home. Of another, they found Cora down by the side of the road. The newspapers said that they can't find the killer, and where he ran off to, nobody knows. Presents are wrapped in their tiny white ribbons. The big tree is glowing, the dogs are asleep. But this Christmas just won't be the same without Cora. And why she ain't with us, I can't see. In her short life, Cora Jones made us happy. She'd light up the whole world with just one smile. So this Christmas I'm thinking about Cora and her family. I hope that someday they'll find peace by and by.
of the things I wanted to mention about his lyrics is, he was working, when he wrote that song, he was working off of the facts that he had from the newspaper, of details of Cora's life and her family, and just kind of took creative license to say things that he didn't know, if she, was down by the, like, hanging out down by the river. And it's really interesting because I actually just saw an interview with Cora's dad where he talked about how she loved hanging out down by the river, and that's one of the places he went to look for her when she went missing. So he was spot on. Rihanna, you remember this when we drove up.
Yeah. That's what I was just going to say is I remember there being eerie accuracy to the details that he had just kind of felt his way through and, intuitively connected with this girl, this story, this entire experience. And it came through, and the family was wowed. The family was surprised. They bewildered, raw still when we played it for them, but also just incredibly grateful and touched, just moved that somebody cared so much. It could put such beautiful art to this tragedy that they were dealing with on their very first Christmas without her, and to have this family come up, and it was so moving.
And I think I've always regarded it as one of Neal's best songs, and every year around Christmas time I do listen to it, and for the last few years, especially with Neal gone, it's had even more of an impact just to hear how beautifully he sang it, and what a beautiful melody he sang. Actually, the melody itself, there's a fun fact. He took the melody from a Woody Guthrie song called Deportee. And the version that Neal knew, he knew the Woody Guthrie version, but we loved the Byrds. And so the Byrds did an amazing version of this, which is on their album, The Ballad of Easy Rider. So the vocal melody that Neal sings is pretty much the vocal melody to Deportee, which is, classic.
I never knew that.
Yeah, it's a classic folk singer move.
Yeah.
This is a classic folk song. I mean, just all the way through.
In such a short amount of time. I mean, it was like he got this call, right, that they wanted to put together a Christmas album with local people out in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Who did not want to do a traditional, happy Santa Claus-y kind of song. And that's when the Cora story hit him.
Well, it's an amazing tale, an amazing song, and I know it was impactful in your life, both of you, and me too, and most of all Neal, for sure.
Yeah. Do you have one of those CDs of the original of the?
I do.
Okay. I was gonna say I've got several of them, that I was going to offer to you. In fact, I'm going to send one to Vicky, Cora's mom. I've been meaning to do that and just kind of and let her know if it's okay with you.
If this lives on.
That you're releasing it as a single, and that it's. I mean, it's all about life.
Yeah. I should say too that when Neal recorded the full band version of it, he was asked by Jim Cardillo to do it, and Jim was our great supporter and Neal's publisher. And at that point, Jim had started working for a record label that was doing this Christmas album. And also Jim somehow is an expert on Christmas music. He knows every Christmas song ever made.
That guy knows every song ever made. I mean, he's an encyclopedia of music information. He's the guy. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys. Thanks for coming and telling this beautiful story. And I hope that you guys have a great Christmas, and everybody who's watching has a great Christmas.
Yeah.
Merry Christmas. Yeah. Hug everyone tight.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. Hold on to the loved ones, as I keep repeating to everybody I know.
Yeah.
Hold on tight. Tomorrow's not a guarantee for any of us.
No.
So.
Thank you. It was great seeing you, Gary.
Thank you so much, Gary.
You guys.
I appreciate it. Nice seeing you again. And